Good morning, real life. Reading from Ecclesiastes 7:15 through 18. In my vain life, I have seen everything. There are righteous people who perish in their righteousness, and there are wicked people who prolong their life in their evil doing. Do not be too righteous and do not act too wise. Why should you destroy yourself? Do not be too wicked and do not be a fool. Why should you die before your time? It is good that you should take hold of the one without letting go of the other. For the one who fears God shall succeed in both. Father, we ask your blessings upon the word, the hearing of the word, the application of the word by your Holy Spirit. Amen. So if I were to title this message, because I'm old school like that, I would call it, so you've seen it all, but you haven't seen everything. If you know the book of Ecclesiastes, then you know the phrase, vanity, vanity, all is vanity. The author comes off quite cynical at times and uses the word vanity almost 40 times. Vanity, that is to say, life is a vapor, a mist. It does not last. It's impossible to fully grasp, to understand, to control, and it's so unpredictable. And so the book can come off quite pessimistic, despairing, cynical of life itself. And we could ask the question, when did he write the book? Well, it must have been a Monday. And if this is how you're experiencing life in the moment, then you have a dialogue partner, a conversation partner in the book of Ecclesiastes. Because the beautiful thing about the biblical text is that it will meet you where you are. Bad things, says the author, happens to good people and vice versa. I mean, all you have to do is read the book of Job to know that that's true. The author says good or bad, in the end, everyone dies. There's nothing new under the sun. Another very famous phrase that comes from Ecclesiastes. Nothing new under the sun. I don't think that's meant to be taken literally. That is to say, okay, we have computers, so there must have been computers centuries ago. No. I think it's just a way of saying that there's monotony in life, kind of like Groundhog Day, the movie. You wake up, work, sleep, repeat. And so the seeming pointlessness or meaninglessness or mundane seasons of life. So the author warns of seasons of death in another famous passage, a time for this, a time for that. He says on the one half that there are seasons for death and uprooting and breaking down, seasons for weeping, for mourning, for losing, for tearing, for hatred and war. That's from Ecclesiastes 3. Ecclesiastes can be pretty dismal. However, just like life, there's another side to the book. It wouldn't make for a pep rally, but if you carefully read the whole book, you might come away thinking that it's quite optimistic in spite of the cynicism. And in spite of the cynicism, he declares that in life there are times for new birth, a time to plant, a time for healing, for building, for laughter, for dancing, for gathering together, a time for treasure hunting, for holding on and for repair. And for all you old hippies out there, there's a time for love and peace. Over and against the author's use of the word vanity is his commending the concept of joy. And so the book comes at you like real life, all the good and the not so much. There are contrasting, conflicting views throughout Ecclesiastes. For example, he speaks of the futility of life and yet declares it's God's blessing to enjoy life. And other such inconsistencies throughout the book. And the reader may want to say, well, make up your mind. And we're tempted somehow to resolve the truth tensions and the inconsistencies, but maybe not so fast. So what if the contradictions are there intentionally? Or if you don't like the word contradiction, say contrast or inconsistencies. Some people, bend over backwards to say there's no contradictions in the Bible. And I just don't have a problem saying maybe there are, and maybe they're there for a reason, intentionally. That is to say, it's a literary device to get us thinking. Just like hyperbole is a common literary device, the intentional use of exaggeration. And we realize that's an exaggeration. Like we say, the phone rang 1,000,000 times today. That's a hyperbole. It's intentional. Everyone understands you don't mean 1,000,000 times. So we have these contradictions as a literary device to get us thinking. And so not so fast about resolving the inconsistencies. Maybe those things are there for a reason, in keeping with the actual lives that we live. That is, some things are not clearly defined the way we would like them to be. Our Bible will abide ambiguity even if we won't. This is an ancient text, not to be judged by contemporary standards. It was written by another people, to another people, of a different culture and historical context, different sensitivities, different values. In fact, this Bible was not written to you. Remember that. You're reading someone else's mail, and without the hard work of study and the help that you receive from others, you will be reading out of context. That is to say, it will be misinterpretation. It was not written to you, but it was written for you. Perhaps this is not the Bible we imagine, maybe not even the Bible we want, but it is the Bible we need because it's the Bible we have been given. And it invites you in if you have the courage. That is to say, you don't bring this book into your world. The Bible brings you into its world because your world is too small, too picky, too narrow. Your world knows too much. The book requires room for imagination and play, room for fits and spells, room for unknowing. It's not a monologue. It's a dialogue. You're supposed to be talking back, asking questions, negotiating, even arguing at times. Like Jacob, you're supposed to have the moxie to wrestle with God. Respectfully, of course. It's not a monologue. It's a dialogue. The book plays hard to get. And by that, I mean not just Ecclesiastes, the whole Bible. What it says, it's like a woman who says to her suitor, will you pursue me? Will you fight for me? It will offend you to test your devotion and your mettle. Are you the kind of lover that comes and goes, or do you remain? Will you betray me, or will you stay? It is the Bible we are given, and what we have been given is honest. And that's the problem. Often it's more honest than we are on a Sunday morning, more courageous, more true to life. Unlike dishonest art you might see or find, let's say, in a Thomas Kincaid painting, because honesty allows for shadows. Our Bible gives equal time for darkness and light. Some readers can't handle the honesty. I heard one preacher say the author of Ecclesiastes must be backslidden. Or perhaps the author was just honest. In our culture of lies, we are not prepared for the honesty in our Bible. Ecclesiastes means teacher, or traditionally translated preacher. So we could use some honest preachers and some honest preaching today. Earthy, grounded in terra firma, under the sun, and not so pale, pasty white, and otherworldly. Preaching not afraid to pause in the shadows, because good preaching will do that. In doing so, it gains credibility with folks who long for authenticity, even if it offends more churchy sensibilities. It may not sell books or paintings, but it does earn trust. And good preaching, like good storytelling, does not resolve the tensions too soon. That is what cheapo preaching does. It pretends to know too much, to say too much, to ruin the punchline by offering the punchline prematurely. The preacher in Ecclesiastes offers validation to those who are now in the shadows of life, where things just don't make sense. To know they're not alone in their questions, not the first to be troubled, validating their view from where they are right now. The questions, the hurts, the presence of inequities and injustice and reasons for doubt, which are many. What if the preacher's in his great wisdom, he wants to write an honest book, one that is reflective of our lives and our uncertainties, with all its contrariness, even if you're living your best life. And so we have a Bible that comes at us the way life does, with curveballs, sinkers, and gimmicky plays. Our Bible, true to life, and why would we want a Bible not true to life, unless we want a book that supports the lies we tell ourselves to prop up our illusions. But true to life, our Bible will challenge our churchy certitudes and those shallow God formulas that we got from our favorite celebrity preacher. Don't reduce the biblical text to mere Christian principles. In this book, you meet a person. In the book of Job, when God finally shows up to face Job's questions of why, surprisingly, God does not answer any questions at all. He simply reminds Job of the divine wonders. No answers, and yet Job, with this God encounter, is more than satisfied. Ask hard questions. It's okay. Be honest. Pray honest prayers. It's okay to argue. And that's what the psalmist does. Often the psalmist will say, "Where are you, God? How long? Why?" And that's what the preacher in Ecclesiastes does. But on the other side of the coin, the preacher advises in caution, chapter 5, verse 1 and 2, guard your steps when you go to the house of God. To draw near to listen is better than the sacrifice offered by fools, for they do not know how to keep from doing evil. Never be rash with your mouth, nor let your heart be quick to utter a word before God. For God is in heaven, and you upon the earth. Therefore, let your words be few. Honest preaching from an honest Bible does not promise easy answers to hard questions. So often it offers questions to all too easy answers. Don't be a fool, says the preacher in Ecclesiastes. The preacher advocates for the pursuit of wisdom, knowledge, but with some reserve. What if the preacher knows we need to remain humble about what we think we know? Remember our limits in knowing and highlight the fact that our God is to be pursued, but at the end of the day, he's too big to finally comprehend. Go deep in God, and God is deeper still. Always something for tomorrow. When you think you've got God all figured out, you don't. The preacher starts off the book declaring his goal to search out and to discover. But the whole second half of Ecclesiastes emphasizes two phrases, one, quote, cannot find, and, quote, cannot know. So, seek, he says, search, desire to learn, but accept your limits. It's a dance with knowing and unknowing, with learning and unlearning, and coming to peace with your limits. Maybe the preacher, maybe you're like the preacher. who's seen a lot. And maybe you think you've seen everything, but you have not seen it all. We must keep things in proportion when it comes to the idea of knowing. George Barna wrote a book titled Think Like Jesus, as if getting our doctrine right is a fix-all. Just think right. But the spirit life is the spirit-filled life is more than cognition and our capacity for reason and logic, more than simply thinking right, more than the famous philosophical, I think, therefore I am. Cheryl Johns says a better title for George Barna, rather than think like Jesus, might be love like Jesus. And a better teleological or philosophical mantra than I think, therefore I am, might be I love, therefore I am. It's no easy task to outline the literary structure of Ecclesiastes. It's not systematic, perhaps in keeping with its general theme. The author jumps around from one theme to another, and you can kind of lose him. And yet there can be found some hints of organization on a broader level. Nevertheless, I dare you to find a clear pattern in the book. Again, I think this is because what we have here is an honest book that comes at us the way real life does. That is to say, broadly ordered, but the order remains elusive. Thus, we're required, again, to possess ourselves with humility and faith, acknowledging our limits and knowing God is above, we are below. Don't be too wise, don't be too righteous. And so, in The Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe, Lucy asks that famous, often quoted passage in the book, asking, is the lion safe? And the answer is no, he's not safe. But he is good. And maybe that's enough. Somebody said this book has all the answers, but really, this book promises to leave some things a mystery. And so it keeps us honest and keeps us interested. Is our Bible and our call to the life of faith safe? Lord, no. I won't lie. It's dangerous. And it comes with few guarantees. The same walk of faith that promises green pastures and still waters will also take you through the valley of the shadow. It is not safe, but thou art with me. Green pastures, still waters, and the danger zone. It's dangerous, but thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Sometimes it's only after the valley of the shadow that you can truly know what it means to say, surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. By the way, the exact center of Psalm 23, and oftentimes in ancient poems, the center of the poem is the main point. The center of Psalms 23 are the words, for thou art with me. It's dangerous, but you're not alone. Safe? No, it's not safe. You should be wearing a helmet because this thing plays for keeps. There are no prenups. You're either in or out, and the fearful need not apply. This God will ask you to both live and to die for him, to lose, to be last, to give yourself away, to love him over your spouse and children and parents, to love him over your family. He will confront your idolatrous familial affections, your idolization and worship of family. Let the dead bury their dead, Jesus seems to say so coldly. To look back is to be unworthy. Follow me, he says. And this one you follow leads to a cross. And so our contemporary sensibilities about what God must or must not be, do, or say, we need to let those things go. What we consider offensive, we might be asked just to get over that. Make the decision to believe in spite of limited understanding, and more understanding will eventually come. Make the decision to follow in spite of being offended, and you might find a breakthrough. This God is both more narrow and more broad than we're comfortable with. He is more harsh and he is more merciful. He is more demanding and more forgiving. He's more elusive and yet more generous. If there is nothing in this book that offends you, then I wonder if you've actually read it. The book is not trying to be nice. It wants to pick a fight. It is real. It is not predictable, and it's not safe. But it is good. Some people will walk away like the rich young ruler in the Gospels. And like the rich young ruler, Jesus will let them walk away. And yet he loves them anyway. In my vain life, says the preacher, I have seen everything. There are righteous people who perish in their righteousness, and there are wicked people who prolong their days in their evil doing. Do not be too righteous. Do not be too wise. Why should you destroy yourself? Do not be too wicked, and do not be a fool. Why should you die before your time? It is good that you should take hold of the one without letting go of the other. For the one who fears God will succeed in both. The Message has that last verse this way. It's best to stay in touch with both sides of an issue. A person who fears God deals responsibly with all reality, not just one piece of it. That is to say, we come to terms with those inconsistencies, learn to deal with them. Bad things happen to good people, and good things can come to the bad. Instant justice sometimes occurs, and it's very satisfying when it does, but distributive justice is unreliable. So sometimes we must just scratch our heads and wait, even if we never see it on this side of living. We are not expecting a preacher to say, do not be too righteous, or you might destroy yourself. But this advice keeps us from depression, kind of in keeping with the Reformation notion of simultaneously both justified and a sinner. So by all means, by the grace and Spirit of God, pursue righteousness, but know that blamelessness is not within your grasp. You have God-given possibilities as well as God-given limitations, and it takes faith for both. So save yourself both from self-righteousness and from an arrogant knowing too much. Hold loosely to your God formulas. Things are 2 + 2 = 4 when you're young in the faith. But as you mature, you're exposed to more complexity. So when you think you've mastered things and you have it all down on paper, he will come by and fold that up and take you to a place of unknowing again. So maintain humble opinions. Possibilities are many, absolutes are few. There are some non-negotiables, but again, they are not many. They are few. Be humble with what you think you know. Your power of reason and logic, that it is not the final arbitrator of truth. And if you think God owes you an explanation for everything, you've overestimated yourself. He will trust you with some secrets, but not until there is some trust. In his work on the Psalms, Walter Brueggemann says that the psalmist teaches us that in some areas of our life, God is always unsettling settled places. This is called maturity. He allows disorientation so that we can be reoriented. And so we travel in repetitive, sequential growth patterns of orientation, disorientation, reorientation. And all this in various areas of our lives and in various times and places. That's called growth and maturity. We abide the tension of pursuing wisdom and righteousness while accepting that some things are always a bit ahead of us, not within our grasp. God is too deep to sound, and thank goodness he is, because a God that I can comprehend is not much of a God. Sometimes life is not a problem to solve, but a mystery to be enjoyed. So if you suffer with the disadvantage of an above average intelligence, I may need to remind you that if you insist God measure up to your rationale, then you've made your powers of reason to be your God. Reason is not the final arbitrator of truth. And I'm not the first to say it, but this does not suggest that God is irrational. But I have no problem saying that God is transrational. That is to say, he stands over it all, and we stand under. Know your place. Forgive the play on words, but it is this posture of standing under that we come to a place of understanding. Like the book of Ecclesiastes, we have some order, but we don't get to stand over that order. We are interpreting the text, or pardon me, we are not interpreting the text until the text is interpreting us. We're not reading right until the text is reading us. We don't master the text masters us. Think like Jesus? Get the text right? Rather, maybe we don't get the text right so much as the text gets us right. And that might be the only thing you need to remember about this little talk today. The Word is not a book. It's a person. It's not knowing about God. It's knowing God. Not the Greek word for knowledge, which has to do with knowing from a safe, objective, disaffected distance. But it's more the Hebrew word for knowing, yada, a knowing which comes by way of experience, a knowing like lovers know, dangerously up close and personal, messy, risky. Reconcile with not knowing everything while at the same time avoiding the despair and cynicism. What we can know is more than enough. If you think everything has to make sense, or if you think that everything does make sense, then you're not paying attention. If you think all is vanity and nothing more, then you're not reading the whole book or the whole of life. Vanity, vanity, all is vanity, says the preacher. And yet he affirms in chapter 9, wholehearted enjoyment of life and the fear of God is the God-given portion of human beings. And he concludes his semi-organized book with these words. The end of the matter, after all has been heard, fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of everyone. For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every secret thing, whether good or evil. At the end of the day, not my time, at the end of the day, things are settled. So let your words be few. You don't have to keep score, just stay in the game. And for all his cynicism, in the end, says the preacher who has seen everything, all will be made right. God bless you.